with Ben and Miriam on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. We're also joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and author and journalist Emma Woolf in the studio. Good morning, to you both. What should we get stuck into first? What about this one from The Telegraph, Matthew? Labour's tax raid on private schools.
Absolutely. So this morning, Bridget Phillipson, the new Education Secretary, has been doing her first sort of big intervention of the government. Amongst other things, she has doubled down on the government's plans to introduce VAT on private school fees. There was some talk during the election that this might be delayed, it might be pushed, if not into the long grass, into the medium grass, and instead it's not going to be pushed into the future. It's actually going to be rolled out sooner. So rather than September next year, obviously the start of that school year, would VAT be slapped on private school fees, it looks like they're going to try and bring it in January.
So is this fair on schools and parents, particularly parents who are really scrimping and saving to send their kids to independent schools? Is it fair to introduce it mid-year when families have already made their budgets?
Well, that will be the big question of whether it's fair to introduce it mid-year. I mean, in terms of the general fairness point, Phillipson this morning was saying, well, schools have had plenty of time to prepare. It was a Labour policy since 2021. And, of course, one of the key things Labour says is that the schools don't have to pass it all on. Two things. One, obviously, when your VAT's imposed, you can claim some of it back as a business, but also because when, there are sort of fat that can be cut in private schools, just as there was when austerity meant that school budgets in the state sector that 93% of Britain's kids go to was imposed on them.
It's interesting, isn't it, how Labour's magic money tree is actually not very fruitful at all, and that they're starting to panic and they need cash. And I really object to this kind of, punishing children, basically. It's like the the two-child benefit cap, which, we can argue endlessly about feckless, irresponsible parents having 6, 7 children if they can't afford them. But when children suffer, many parents who send their children to private schools, like my parents, absolutely are scrimping and saving and deciding to do that with their money, to do that with any spare money that they're not going on foreign holidays, they're not buying new cars, whatever it is, and that they are prioritising that money in order to send their... Not all private school parents are wealthy. Not all private schools, like Eton, like Winchester, are able to just suck it up. There are schools now that are going to close down because of this, and there are children who are going to be moved out of private schools into state schools, and let's not even go into what that's going to do to local
there's spare capacity in most state schools at the moment.
There isn't.
Let me play devil's advocate.
That is simply not true. No, Matthew, I'm getting a 3-year-old at the moment into private schools. There isn't spare capacity
One of the biggest concerns,
schools,
though, is about children with special educational needs.
Yes.
Because it's certainly true, and I think Labour will agree, that actually a lot of the kids in private schools are there because their parents couldn't get their needs met in the state system. This is going to be hugely expensive for the state system. They may have capacity for children without additional needs, but have they got the capacity?
So I think that's one of the big stumbling blocks in this policy, and I wonder if, in return for introducing the policy in January rather than in September, there's going to be special provision for those with special educational needs.
Right, let's move on. Page 2 of the Daily Telegraph. Alert over energy drink diets. Emma, what is this about?
Well, this is really, sorry to be angry again, but this is really
You're fuming this morning.
I am. Well, cycling through central London in this Monday morning traffic really gets you in a bad mood. No, this is rich. I mean, the NHS... the NHS mental health director, Claire Murdoch, starting to talk about energy drinks being one of the drivers of eating disorders. Now, as you know, I had anorexia for 10 years. I've written endlessly. I've written 10 books about eating disorders, mental health, young people, all of that, anorexia. There are lots of things that are fueling eating disorders, and we can go into all that. We don't have time. But the one thing that's not fueling eating disorders or particularly contributing is energy drinks. If you have anorexia, you're going to be either starving, using chewing gum, using ice cubes, using energy drinks, using laxatives, abusing diuretics, all of those kinds of things. Energy drinks are not the key driver. The NHS mental health director needs to focus on providing support and therapy at an early stage, intervention at an early stage for young people suffering with eating disorders is key. The NHS is completely failing on that. For many reasons, the waiting lists are months long. I speak to parents and young people themselves every single day who say they are desperate to get help for young people.
And ongoing support as well, isn't it? That's that.
Ongoing support, but it's cognitive behavioural therapy, it's hospitalisation in some cases, people being sent to the other side of the country with a 15-year-old daughter.
But do you think the broader point of marketing, and particularly now social media, it's much easier for people with eating disorders to find out some of these tricks, if you like, and that it is therefore becoming much more widespread because of social media? Do you think the NHS have got a point about the marketisation?
Trust me, when you have an eating disorder, great. If you're having something, if you're having some energy drinks, look, these are not, this is not really part of the mix. There's all sorts of stuff out there that we know is fat-free, taste-free, calorie-free, sugar-free, all of that
Can I just ask
stuff.
a basic question, just in case anyone's not following along? Why are energy drinks supposedly good for diet? Is it because they're low-cal and they keep you feeling
high
full?
in caffeine gives you some energy, full of nothing, basically, full of chemicals and whatever. But as I say, there are so many kind of advice. I mean, what about the internet? Let's crack down on the internet, which is full of really hateful pro-anorexia and
Matthew, do we need your lot to get involved here and ban energy drinks?
Well, I think, I'm not one of those Labour people who's in favour of slapping a ban on everything, and I think I rather agree with Emma that what we need is a kind of holistic approach rather than just picking up what the latest kind of, one little bit of the picture. We need to see the whole picture, which I hope overall on what's such an important subject will happen.
OK, thank you both. You'll be back in the next hour. We'll have some more juicy stories for you, I'm sure.
Indeed. And now it's time for your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.